After Jesus was born in Bethlehem in the territory of Judea, during the rule of King Herod, Magi came from the east to Jerusalem. They asked, "Where is the newborn King of the Jews? We've seen his star in the east, and we've come to honor him." When King Herod heard this, he was troubled, and everyone in Jerusalem was troubled with him. He gathered all the chief priests and the legal experts and asked them where the Christ was to be born. They said, "In Bethlehem of Judea, for this is what the prophet wrote. You, Bethlehem, land of Judah, by no means are you least among the rulers of Judah, because from you will come one who governs, who will shepherd my people Israel." Then Herod secretly called for the Magi and found out from them the time when the star had first appeared. He sent them to Bethlehem, saying, "Go and search carefully for the child. When you found him, report to me so that I too may go and honor him." When they heard the king, they went and looked. The star they had seen in the east went ahead of them until it stood over the place where the child was. When they saw the star, they were filled with joy. They entered the house and saw the child with Mary, his mother. Falling on their knees, they honored him. Then they opened their treasure chest and presented him with gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh, because they were warned in a dream not to return to Herod. They went back to their own country by another route. Here ends the reading of our lesson. May your word abide in us, O Lord. And now may the words of my mouth and may the meditations of our hearts be acceptable in thy sight, O Lord, our rock and our redeemer. Amen. Well, it's 2022, and I wonder how long it's going to take me to get used to writing 2022 on my checks. But the 1920s were called the Roaring 20s. I wonder what adjective this decade will receive. It certainly hasn't started out too well. These past two Christmases have been different, very different for a lot of people. I know that they have been for me. And really, without some of the distractions and all the frantic activities that we normally associate with Christmas time, these past two Christmases have really been more meaningful for me. From the very beginning, people have been seeking the true meaning of Christmas, and that is the Christ child. In our lesson today, the Magi arrive in Jerusalem during the reign of King Herod the Great, and they ask, "Where is the newborn King of the Jews?" Their search began a quest that continues to this day. People are still trying to find the Christ child. And from the very beginning, it seems as if he was pushed to the very periphery of things. His birth caused a great deal of trouble. His coming indicated change, and people don't like to change. They still don't like to change. And instead of it being a time for rejoicing, it turned out to be his presence caused a great disturbance. Herod was disturbed. He was very disturbed. The mention of another king was a threat to his power. The priests and the scribes were disturbed. The actual coming of the Messiah threatened their tight control on the religion of the day. They pretended to be interested in the Christ, in the Messiah, but really their minds were occupied with their own concerns. They gave lip service to the idea of a Messiah, but actually they were just looking out for themselves. And there's something that's always perplexed me about this account. The priestly scholars knew the prophecies concerning the Messiah. They could locate the very spot where he was born. But they didn't even have the curiosity to travel the 9 miles from Jerusalem to Bethlehem with the distinguished visitors from the other land to see if there was any truth in what they had said. They seemed to be totally indifferent about whatever had happened. And although the Magi were holy men of a foreign religion, they searched for the Christ child. They followed the star that had initiated their journey. The star they had seen in the east went ahead of them until it stood over the place where the child was. A lot of people today say, well, if I had some dramatic happening that would capture my attention, then it would be easy for me to find the Christ, to follow Jesus. But it takes more than something dramatic, and I think it was more than just the star that enabled the Magi to find the Christ. I'm impressed by their single-minded concentration. They weren't deterred by the distance from their homeland to Bethlehem. They were not discouraged by the rigors of desert travel. They didn't let the treachery of Herod and his court deviate them from their goal. They firmly had in their minds and their hearts a desire to find the newborn king, and they would not be distracted from that goal. And what enabled the Magi to find the Christ is what is still required to follow him, to find him today. We must have a single-minded concentration. We must have the willingness to follow whatever leads we may have that will lead us to the Christ child. We may see no visible star, but there are lights all around us and lights within us, every bit as bright as the star that the Magi followed. We just need to be on the lookout for those lights. First, we look for those lights in our own situations, in our own circumstances, as ordinary as our life may seem to be to us. We don't have to go anywhere to find the Christ. That is what Christmas is all about. Christ, God came to us in Jesus Christ, born of the flesh. God is here with us. We just need to open our eyes and our hearts to see him. And sometimes it is difficult to find the Christ in our mundane, everyday experience. We face so many distractions and selfish concerns and fears and feelings of grief and guilt and all kinds of things that keep us from seeing the presence of God in our midst. I know this morning, I guess I especially looking at it in light of this lesson, I had a God thing. After this Sunday, I've not been sure what I'm going to be preaching on. We haven't finished the Gospel of Luke yet, but I want to finish that during the season of Lent. So I have about 7 weeks before that, and I think 7 weeks after that, until I retire. And so what am I going to preach on? And I know at least 2 of our members finished reading the Bible and have both mentioned to me the book of Revelation. And I thought, well, maybe I would end by doing a study on the book of Revelation. And I will tell you, it won't be like any study. I did this in 1999, before the year 2000, and I did a very in-depth study, and it was well received, but it's not your typical study on Revelation. And I thought there was a book that really helped me, but I couldn't remember what the book was. And I had told Nancy Goff that it was Reversing Thunder, but then when I did find that book at my house, and that wasn't the book. And so I was, I think, brushing my teeth, and all of a sudden, there was M-E-T-Z. It was the beginning of the last name. And I thought, I think that's the name of the guy that wrote the book. I still couldn't remember the title of the book. So with Google, or Amazon, I got on Amazon, I put in those 4 letters, and I found the book. And it's Breaking the Code. And it's been revised in 2019. So you are probably going to get to me, that was God speaking to me saying, we will do the study on Revelation, so to finish out the year. So, but I could have, it could have been a coincidence, but I think it was a God thing. And we need to look at the ordinary things that happen in our lives and think, is God speaking to me? Is God helping me? Is God directing me here? And if we don't look for him in the ordinary things and the ordinary happenings of our life, then we're never going to find him. And somewhere in every life, there is a star that shines to indicate the presence of the Christ. And if we follow that star with genuine concern, with determination, then we will find the Christ. We will find the Messiah. And we can also look for the Christ in others. We can listen for him in their longings. We can find him in their pain and in their needs. As Jesus said, one of the parables he said, I assure you that what you have done for the least of these, my brothers and sisters, you have done it for me. So we see the Christ in other people. We see it in their needs, in their cares and concerns. We look for the Christ when we are among his people. As Jesus also said, where 2 or 3 are gathered in my name, I am there with them. We are gathered in his name. He is here with us. We look for him in deeds of kindness and generosity because it's his Spirit in us that prompts us to do those things. We look for him in those impulses, those promptings that lead us to share and to serve. He is all around us. He is here with us. But not everyone will find him. Not everyone will recognize him. Now I would like to tell you a story. And I believe it's a true story. And it comes from the land of the Magi. The Magi that we read about in the lesson would have known this story. During the days of the Persian king ruler Cyrus the Great, there was a political resistor named Caligula who lived on the southern border of Cyrus's vast empire. This chieftain consistently defeated the small detachments of Cyrus's army that were sent out to subdue him. Well, finally, the emperor sent out his whole army, and the chieftain Caligula was captured. He and his family was taken to the capital for trial and execution. On the appointed day, they stood in the judgment hall before Cyrus. Cyrus was impressed by this handsome and fearless man, his noble wife, and his 2 beautiful children. And finally Cyrus said, "What would you do, Caligula, if I were to spare your life?" "Your Majesty," came the reply, "if you spared my life, I would return to my home and remain your obedient servant as long as I live." Cyrus asked, "What would you do if I spared the lives of your children?" "Your Majesty, if you spared the lives of my children, I would gather my scattered horde, place your banner over them, and lead them to victory on many fields of battle." Then Cyrus asked, "And what would you do if I spared the life of your wife?" "Your Majesty, if you spared the life of my wife, I would die for you." The emperor was so moved that he freed them all and returned Caligula to his province to act as governor. And on the way home, Caligula asked his wife, "Did you notice the marble at the entrance of the palace, the different colors and the figures so perfectly formed?" "No," she said, "I didn't notice the marble." "Did you notice the tapestry on the wall of the corridor outside the great hall? It was magnificent." "No," she said, "I didn't notice the tapestry." "Well, surely you noticed the emperor's throne. It seemed to have been carved from one lump of gold." "No," she said, "I didn't notice the throne." And Caligula asked, Did you see nothing? And she answered, on the way in, I was too full of fear to see. And on the way out, I beheld only the face of the man who said that he would die for me. The Magi beheld the face of the child that would one day die for them, die for us, die for all people. I don't know what you are seeing as we begin this new year together. We are surrounded by so many different distractions, but there is so much to see, and there is so much to discover about the Christ child who died for us. If we fail to see the Christ that came to be with us, to give up his life for us, then God help us. Amen.